What is going on, everybody? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Click Gaming's weekly podcast. It is Tuesday, September 29th, 2020. As you can see, it's just Chance and myself. Chance, head of production for Click Gaming, and myself is do everything else, along with Johnny. Johnny is currently out right now, tending to some daddy duties, but we're going to continue the tradition of Tuesday night recordings.
Tradition at week number 3.
It's tradition if you do it at least twice, right?
I don't know how it works.
But anyways, we are going to talk about kind of the future of eSports and just video games in general. Chance and I have talked about this before offline, and Chance is really good about talking about things he's never thought about, but he's even better about talking about things he has talked about before.
Let's see.
So what is kind of the current, let's kind of establish how esports is right now in gaming. Esports, what, $1 billion industry, right? Doubling every 3 years, I think.
It's getting big, that's for sure.
Yeah, let's see. 2020 global esports market was valued at just under $1 billion. By 2023, estimated at $1.6 billion US dollars. So why are esports so popular right now, Chance? Or gaming?
Well,
that's a
about
loaded
right
question.
now is harder. I feel like let's start earlier. Let's start about where we came from, because I feel like that's easier to get to where we're at right now. Because right now is an interesting situation. Also, we're not going to be monetized. We're going to say Corona 5,000 times. Let's go ahead and get that out of the way.
That's perfect.
Who cares about monetization? I think it might be more interesting to talk about like where we've come from, right? So, like, how long has football been around? Like sports in general, right? Has been around for the freaking early 1900s.
Yeah,
I don't know when the NFL was like the Super Bowl 58.
You're talking about modern sports?
Yeah, basically.
Okay,
I mean, sports have been around since the beginning of time, but like the modern, what we currently consider sports because of TV and radio. Super Bowl 58 this year?
Something about that.
So the NFL has been doing Super Bowls for mid-50s. Somebody's going to correct me if somebody actually watches this. Somebody will correct me saying I'm completely wrong. But anyway.
100th season.
100th season.
Currently, yes. So
that's a big difference between, isn't it 50 Super Bowls? 50-something Super Bowls?
Yeah, but it's 60, not
right?
like it's 54.
54.
But it's like current era.
Okay. So anyway, say 100 years, right? So 1920-ish is when kind of football started as, like I say football, the NFL started. We got a real professional leagues, sports. And then like that was a thing, but like stuff didn't get big till we had a way to broadcast it to everybody, right? So like sports were like, you go to the local baseball field, you go to the local football field, watch a sports game or whatever. But that's not when these big, like actual big money came into play, right? That was, hey, let's go spend whatever $19-20 was, a nickel or something, right? And go watch a sports game, right? It was just kind of local, like everybody kind of came and hang out. Tailgating wasn't a thing because they barely had tailgates, but like, you go hang out at the ball game. Everybody kind of have a good time, and then it kind of got bigger, but then you really didn't see a big blow up until like radio, right? Radio was a first kind of big push to get in sports on radio, and so that brought in like casters, right? People talking about.
So you're saying monetization is what kind of helped bring sports, at least football, into the modern.
Not necessarily monetization, but like a distribution platform, some sort of platform to distribute. Like you could have people listening to the sports game across the country, right? If it's on a nationally televised radio station, you could have somebody like listen, New York Mets in freaking LA, right? So that's when as technology advanced, sports became bigger and bigger, right? And they kind of rode that coattail, and an NFL and NBA and a lot of that stuff really didn't come into play until TV became a thing, right? So when we had a big nationally televised sports games, that's really where where some of the bigger sports we see today are football, basketball. I don't even know what else. Soccer, right? Soccer's
NASCAR.
huge. This is American football, right? And
Yeah.
NASCAR, right? NASCAR, like any of these big televised sports, right? They didn't get very big until the platform was there to distribute it, right? So everybody could watch it. You can only travel, fly so far, to watch your sports team, right? So like the ability to have access to it, to be able to watch the Green Bay Packers all season long, no matter where they're at, like that's big, right? So we really played off of that. And then also, anyway, so that's kind of where sports was at, right? Esports has been a thing, but we didn't really have esports before we had computers, right? So kind of the first driving factor just to be able to play video games was we had a video game console and computers, right? So we've been kind of in this, I don't know, infancy maybe of technology being able to just play video games in general. And then, so that was kind of the first evolution of being able to play video games, period. And then, you'd have friends over and play Smash Bros. Or whatever, right? So that was, or, it's Mario Kart, back in Nintendo 64 days. So we had these things like we was local. So it started out, everybody just kind of playing with each other, having a good time, going hanging out. And as time goes on, we finally got the internet in a good enough spot and just software and computers in general in a good enough spot where anybody could play anybody, right? So now we have completely online games, and we've had those for 15 years, maybe, right? Mid 2000s is kind of where some of the online gameplay kicked off.
Yeah.
And so that was really the first, like, hey, you could play anybody in the world, like we still have some issues with like latency and some of that stuff we're still trying to work out, but like you could in theory play anybody in the world. Like I say, maybe mid to late 2000s is really where it kind of started kicked off. What the Xbox One came out, and we were looking it up the other day, like 2012, 2013 timeframe. And so that, the Xbox One came out, that's really where Xbox Live kicked off, right? So like it became a big deal to play online. Like pretty much every game was released, you play online, or at least had the opportunity to play online. So like we've come a long way in a sense of like we're now at the point where anybody can play anybody, and we have the platforms to distribute it, right? So we have Twitch, we have YouTube, we have, and they're the two biggest, right? And there's some other streaming platforms and miscellaneous stuff you can throw in there, but basically it's Twitch and YouTube for distribution. And then like some of the big television networks are starting to pick up some esports, especially because of Corona. But really, we're starting to get the distribution in place, right? So like people are playing, now we're getting the distribution side in place, and so we've come a long way. And so I feel like it's the same way sports evolved is the way esports is going to evolve. It's just kind of, it takes time, right? Everything's got to catch up.
Yeah, I mean, I see it from the monetization of like, well,
oh, money's nice for sure.
I mean,
everybody likes money,
but the platform has to be there first, or you can't monetize. Because if you have 0 people on your platform, nobody wants to monetize 0 people. So,
right? Because typical monetization off any sports period is just the attention, right? So people pay for the attention and for marketing, right? So you have a company and you want to spend some money and get more attention and get more people looking at your stuff, right? And so the advertising is paying for that attention. So like, oh, hey, I have, say radio for, right? So like maybe it's a nationally televised radio broadcast for some sports game. I have 30,000 people listening, right? So like if I pay for you to say something, then 30,000 people are going to hear it, right? So that's the attention arbitrage is really where the money comes into play. Because like if we have something, if you have something somebody enjoys watching, then people are naturally drawn to it. And so you have the attention, then it's just a matter of connecting the dots of like, hey, we have Coca-Cola who likes selling fizzy soft drinks, and they wanted to have more people that drink their soft drink, right? So you say, hey, we love Coca-Cola, and 30,000 people heard you say that, and now 30,000 people thought about drinking a Coca-Cola, So, or maybe maybe it's a new platform, maybe it's a new company starting up, right? Nobody knows about them. So like, Coca-Cola started somewhere, right? That's probably radio. They were probably early in the radio game. But yeah, just getting that attention. So that's what people pay for, is that attention of like, hey, you did the work to get 10,000 people watching you. Well, now I want to, I'm going to pay you because you did the work for that, right? And be able to have you talk about our brand or talk about new products or whatever.
Yeah, and so I say we, the industry of esports is kind of, or just video games in general, is still in that beginning phase of we're still building the viewership and getting the exposure out there, right? I mean,
Oh, right, but it's come a long way, dude. Like, you look at, I mean, what the frick does Ninja make a year? Like, we're currently to the point where we have celebrities in esports, and so we're basically there. Like we still have a long way to go, but we're basically there as far as monetization goes, and like just getting a large number of people involved. We have a long way to go because it's not the NFL or the NBA or whatever the soccer league is, right? Like, we're not there yet, but also we're big enough that like we're there.
well, what separates? Why does somebody watch an esport versus? I say esport. I keep saying esport. Why does somebody watch somebody play video games or the competition of video games rather than their football game? Like, I mean, what drives? Is it just because that
Probably,
skill gap?
I'm gonna flip that. Why does somebody
Okay.
watch what they're used to watching versus watch a new thing? Right. So like probably the better question is because majority of people don't watch esports yet, as far as like just a pastime of like, hey, I'm gonna kick back, drink a beer, and watch like Call of Duty or whatever, right? Like that's becoming a thing, but it's not a thing yet. And so really, probably the better question to ask is why somebody is currently still watching football when they may enjoy watching Call of Duty, Valorant, League of Legends, right? Some of the other competitions, right? Other sports. Why do they keep watching football when they, might transition over to League of Legends and freaking love it, right? Like, care way more about League of Legends than they ever did about football.
Well, to kind of add on to what you said, I think a lot of it stems from what games you play yourself. I was thinking along the lines of like you play the game yourself, so you play Call of Duty. You're most likely going to enjoy watching somebody play Call of Duty. Not necessarily, but I mean, you know the game, you understand it, and seeing somebody do it at a high level or see somebody competing is I wouldn't say as exhilarating, but it can be very exhilarating watching.
Right, which is why I turned your question around, right? So that's why I turned the question around of like, why would somebody currently watch football over Call of Duty, right? Well, it's because of knowledge of the game, right? So like everybody played football in college, right? Like that's or in high school. I mean, so high school football is still huge. I mean, it's dying down probably, especially if you're not in the Midwest. But like high school football is huge. Like a significant portion of the population all played football in high school, and obviously Northern portion played basketball and like a handful of random other sports, right? So your question about Call of Duty is the same question as of why somebody would watch NFL. It's because they know the game. They have in common with other coworkers, right? So like they know, like, hey, that was
They can talk about it with them.
Hey, like what the heck, that was an awful penalty. Hey, like what the heck, like they was out of bounds, he was inbounds. Like how, like oh well, does that have to be 1 foot or 2 foot inbounds, right? Does he have to like do a double backflip before he gets a touchdown versus do a single backflip, right? Like like knowing the rules is important and knowing how the game operates. Of like, oh, you get 4 tries to go 10 yards, right? So like, there's a lot of basic understanding that you kind of take advantage of when you're watching football that you may not actually think about. And same way with any esports, anything basically anything you're watching that's competitive, you kind of want to know like, hey, what's going on? Why is this happening? Like, what's coming up? So that type of stuff of like, so knowing the nuances of, hey, this is Call of Duty gunfight versus Call of Duty search and destroy. So knowing those nuances of like, oh, they have a bomb because they got to go plant the bomb and then somebody else tries to come defuse the bomb. Like knowing the nuances of that versus, hey, they're just trying to shoot each other in a gunfight. So those nuances and like the underlying basic level of knowledge is important for somebody to actually enjoy watching the game. And part of that's filled in with casting, right? So like sports casting is the same way as esports casting, kind of to a certain extent. Sports casting is a little slower usually because things tend to be slower in physical sports versus esports, but basically the same, right? It's like, hey, this was important. He should know about this. Hey, think about this. Other weird statistics of like, oh, this person threw 3 interceptions last year and he's up to 2 already or whatever, right? These weird facts and just, hey, how does the game operate? Of like, oh, hey, we changed this rule this year, right? Now you got to have 2 feet inbound versus 1 foot inbound or something, right? Those rules that change every so often, if like they make something else new up, or like to talk about, hey, that was a face mask. and then like review the play and be like, well, was it a face mask? I don't really know. And then, go back and forth like that. That adds a lot of depth to what you're watching. It's the same with esports, right? So the casting helps fill part of that void, but like there's also a basic level of like, I know how the game operates. That is important for somebody to actually just turn on Call of Duty Gunfight, a tournament, and watch it, right? So I think that's a lot of the reason why like it's not more widely adopted at this point, is just the underlying knowledge, because significant portion of the population, 35 and up, maybe, I don't know what the actual numbers are, but somewhere in there, don't play video games, right? They don't play video games, so they don't have the basic the underlying knowledge of how some of this works. And so I think that's there's a big gap there. And after another 30, 40, 50 years, pretty much everybody will play esports or play at least some sort of video game. And so because you'll have that underlying knowledge there, it'll be a lot easier in 50 years for somebody to turn on esports versus turn on football, the NFL, NBA.
Well, each esport is kind of its own, I say kind of, it is its own kind of competition of knowing the different rules. Like when we did Overwatch this last weekend, obviously I learned a lot, and I still don't know very much. But like, I know a lot about Call of Duty. I know a lot about like any of the replicant of sports games. I know a lot of like StarCraft, that kind of stuff. But like watching Overwatch is like completely different. So that wouldn't necessarily be a game I flip on when I, like say in my pastime, if I'm looking for content, I don't think I'd be looking for Overwatch content because I don't know the game as well. I'm kind of filling in with like a personal attachment to what you just said.
Exactly.
So why does esports edge these other sports, like physical sports, in the next 10 years? Like what puts them at an advantage versus a normal football or basketball sport?
So there's a few advantages, and we'll kind of see how it plays out, because some things are advantages, some are disadvantages, right? So like as far as the competitiveness, right? Esports, you get a worldwide competition, which is kind of a thing with some sports, right? Soccer is a big worldwide sport. So you kind of get some of that, but also it's hard to travel. So the plus side about esports is if we ever actually get the internet to a good point, then it's worldwide competition, right? Somebody in Florida compete with somebody in freaking, I don't know, China, right? Like, so you get a worldwide competition. So it's a different flavor of competition. And you also get the side of the coin where everybody can basically play forever, right? There's not like this, hey, I'm old and tired now. I mean, maybe to a certain extent, but not like it is with sports, right? So if you're playing basketball, right, you hit 40, it's like, you sure you can still play? Like your body's kind of getting up there,
Even
dude.
35, but yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, whatever the number is, arbitrary number, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like video games, right? I mean, yeah, maybe you get a little slower, maybe not quite as good as you were, but like you can pretty much continue playing for the rest of your life. Yeah. So
at least at a high level, maybe not necessarily a pro level, but definitely a high level.
Right. Like amateur level, like, no, you're not going to compete in the pros for 100 years, right? But competing in an amateur, like just like, because a lot of people play softball. Right? They have like a softball league they're part of, and they play softball every Sunday or Saturday, right? That's going to become a bigger thing over time as people get more used to playing video games just in general. It's going to become a thing of like, oh, we're going to have a local random video game league, right? And just like I say, just like softball, right? So people play softball forever because, it's not too hard on you. You can pretty much play and even into your friggin' 60s and 70s and 80s, right? As long as you're somewhat in shape. So like, it's going to be that of like just guys getting together, having fun, girls getting together and have fun, whoever getting together and having fun, just to kind of blow off some steam and enjoy life, right? So that's one plus, is that you can actually play the game you're watching, right? So you can't, a 55-year-old's probably not going to go play amateur football, right? Like they probably like their bones and body too much. But if you're watching Call of Duty and you're 55, you can play a few rounds of Call of Duty occasionally, and they join a random tournament and compete, right? Like, So that's a big advantage of like you're a lot more connected to the sport. Like instead of just being connected, like, hey, when I was 18, I was a linebacker in high school on varsity, right? Like you have that connection, but like now you can be like, oh yeah, I played that 2 days ago. Like, oh yeah, that's cool. Oh yeah, I saw that new gun. Oh yeah, you get a lot more connection with the players. So there's that side of the coin where it's like it's more accessible, and so and it's a big plus. And then on that is like other side of the coin of like it's way more competitive, right? Like you're not limited to 50 teams in the NFL or whatever it is, right? You're not limited to like location. So the fact it's way more limited and it's way more competition, right? You'll have better competition, and so like you're gonna have people that stand out and people that freaking wreck the world, right? You're gonna have
your demographic is a lot larger. Is kind of what you're saying. Because
just the competition, right? The skill base of the players is going to be crazy, like way higher, right? Like we think the NFL is pretty good, but like think about the NFL when 7 billion people can compete, right? Like you have way like there's you think NFL's cream of the crop, like you're really going to have the cream of the crop when you 300 million versus 7 billion people can be involved.
So you said accessibility. I called it demographic. You said
competition
demographic might be a good way to put it. And then what? So those are kind of the two advantages. What would you say a disadvantage is to the youth of the industry? I guess is probably one of your largest disadvantages of esports, right?
Talking like disadvantages of like why is it not there, or disadvantages of like, hey, in 50 years when they're the same, like what's the disadvantage? Because I was thinking like in 50 years when they're basically the same, what are the disadvantages versus advantages of esports?
Yeah,
that's where I was going with the question. So like my disadvantages in that same context of like in 50 years when there's no like what do you watch, football or esports, like when they're the same, like in 50 years, like what are the advantages and disadvantages of esports? And we'll see what happens. The disadvantages right now are the fact that you have to have a decent computer, right? You can't just go buy a $20 football and toss around with friends, right? Like you gotta have a good internet connection, right? So internet's a big deal, especially currently because our internet infrastructure is pretty atrocious. It's bad. So that's a big disadvantage right now. And will it be solved in 50 years? I don't know. It may be, but the internet is a big issue, big disadvantage. So just the technology side maybe is a big disadvantage of like football. You can go buy a $20 football and pass it around, right? Softball, you go buy a $30 bat and a couple of softballs, you go play softball, right? Like, and maybe a glove, right? So, your cost of entry and your tools required are much different, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, go ahead.
We're getting there with some of the esports titles aren't super demanding. You can play Rocket League on a pretty bare bones PC, and especially with the way graphics engines are going, like it's getting better. But also every time we get better hardware, we just make the games look better. So like, is it ever actually going to come down where like you can game on a $150 PC, like an actual $150 PC? I don't know. I'm assuming, or maybe the cloud gaming or something like that takes off and takes some of that initial hump of like the investment, and it's a recurring investment, right? You got your football and it's 25 years old. Like it's probably, if you took care of it, it's probably still a fine football. But where's your computer, right? Like if you have a 25-year-old computer, like I promise you ain't playing Rocket League. So,
well, I was going to add to the kind of the pros, and this applies to now versus also, when the NFL and all like normal physical sports are equal to kind of the general esport communities, is that the esport community is just so broad in the fact that it applies to everybody. It can apply to anybody's interest. Like I was talking about earlier, like I don't know anything about Overwatch, but it's interesting. I don't know anything about League of Legends. It's not interesting to me. But I have
right.
5 other games in my back pocket that I'm like, oh, I like these. Like right. I can play these, or I can learn to play these, and I can watch them. But there's some games that like I would enjoy watching, like League of Legends. And I don't even know if I got to a point where if I understood the game really well, that I would enjoy watching it. It's just, I mean, we all have obviously different interests. But there's certain games like that maybe are single player that, somebody might enjoy watching, like a Let's Play with a content creator that a lot of people aren't going to watch, but that piques their interest. So, and I mean, that's not necessarily an esport, but just watching content in general for esports, I think is a huge advantage, because how many sports are there that you really watch that are out there? Football, basketball, soccer, NASCAR, NHL. Like there's like what you can count on your fingers and toes how many sports there are, versus, I mean, the esports or content for the esports is massive.
Right. And at any one point in time, you basically have baseball and some other random sport to watch, right? Like baseball, I swear baseball season is like all year round now.
It's like 8 months, yeah.
It seems like it just keeps getting longer every year. So you basically have baseball and some other option, because like the basketball and football overlap some, but like like some point in time you got basketball and football and baseball, but like, it goes up and down. You maybe have 3 or 4 sports, but yeah, no, for sure. That's another pro of but not necessarily just esports in general, but where we are at with content distribution and the platforms. So we have content distribution and platforms that are accessible by anybody in the world to upload content to, right? So if you think about that, when real sports, we're Americans, so our real sports are American football, NBA, maybe hockey, baseball, like the few other random sports. But like basically that's our what we consider main sports. If we were in Australia or Spain or something, we would have a different opinion. But basically, it doesn't really matter what sport you're talking about. It's the fact that when these sports are becoming bigger and the radio and television was really the driving factor for a lot of these sports getting big, there was gatekeepers. So there was somebody like you had to go and talk to and get a contract with and like go through all sorts of hoops. And they had to like you and you couldn't make them mad. And there's all sorts of hoops you had to jump through to just get content out to the world, right? So if you wanted to have an NFL team, like you got some work ahead of you, right? Even 30, 40, 50 years ago when NFL wasn't as big, like you got some work to do.
You still have some hoops. You have a lot of hoops to jump through.
Right. All right. And you had like money, you had to have huge money investments, right? Like the hurdle to actually producing content or being involved in a sport was pretty high. Now, because we basically have no gatekeepers, right? Like the platforms have a slight gatekeeper-ish feel, but it's not like it was 50 years ago, right? Like you can get on a platform and cuss freaking every other word coming out of your mouth, just random cuss words, and you can post that and it'll be there, right? 50 years ago, right? Like I don't even know if you could say a cuss word on TV, right? Like that wasn't a thing, right? So there's gatekeepers, right? So like the freedom to post basically whatever you want is there. Like, okay, maybe like advertisers start getting pissy about like, no, we don't want to advertise on your content because you say too many cuss words, like that type of stuff. Or no, you talked about Corona, we're not going to give you advertising money because we don't like Corona, like that type of stuff. Like advertisers are going to do that because their demographics they're trying to serve to, and that they don't want to be associated with certain things, right? And so you're going to have some of the money side of things where like YouTube is kind of especially that way of everybody likes YouTube because you get marketing dollars, which is neither here nor there, but they make it very easy to get marketing dollars on YouTube. But with that, they can also take it away very easy, right? They can also say, hey, we're not going to monetize, which is a big thing, right? They put yank monetization, but usually they don't take videos down. I mean, they'll take videos down. They do some of that stuff of like, maybe they shouldn't have taken it down. So they are doing some of that. It's getting worse, I feel like, about like taking videos down and stuff. Maybe we should hear about it more. I don't know. But basically, there's no gatekeepers what I'm trying to get at. There are the edge cases where they're gatekeepers, but there are basically no gatekeepers at this point. So basically, anybody with a freaking cell phone, it could be a 20-year-old cell phone. Like as long as it's got a camera, you could take your flip phone and freaking record video on it, right? And post it to YouTube. So if you got a freaking $100 computer, you got a freaking 2002 Windows XP machine and a 20-year-old cell phone, you can get a Motorola Razr or whatever, plug in your Windows XP machine and post content from that, right? So like the barrier to entry is basically $100 at this point, right? Like you already have a cell phone, so like the barrier to entry is basically nothing because you're already carrying around a cell phone. So there's no barrier to entry for producing content. And so same with esports, right? You already have a gaming console, you already have an internet connection, so you can basically participate in esports. You're not going to be at a pro level. Maybe you get there, right? Maybe somebody picks you up and you get to the pro scene, but also like you can participate, right? You can join our tournaments, right? Shameless plug. battlefy.com/clickgaming. But anyway, so yeah, so the accessibility is definitely there as far as content production and distribution, right? So, you have the random, like, I don't know, whatever game you play. What's that game you play all the friggin' time at night? Among Us, right?
Oh yeah, Among
You can
Us.
have the 4 people in the world that enjoy watching Among Us in 2 years, right? 2 or 3 years, and Among Us is not a thing anymore. You have 4 people in the world that still enjoy watching Among Us, and there should be one Twitch person that still enjoys playing Among Us, and so there's all 5 of them are going to be together on the same Twitch channel, just hanging out playing Among Us when nobody else cares, right? Like, you have that, you're gonna have that, right? The 7 people in the world that care about this random video game can all get together and care about the one random video game.
Well, I was going to say, even content production now is even easier, especially with a company like us, where we produce the content for you, and or we're getting to where we can produce the content for you. So, like, you don't even have to, and like, we'll shout you out, like that kind of stuff. So, like, it's even easier than what you said of, like, you have to produce your own content. Like, we're producing it for you.
Right, and yeah, and you're gonna have that, right? If you play a tournament that's got live production with it, you'll have some content come out of it, right? But I was getting at the point of, like, more so if anybody can go on Twitch and make a Twitch channel, anybody can go on YouTube, make a YouTube channel, anybody can go, like, have
On TikTok, I said
TikTok
earlier,
and I mean any basically one of these platforms and make content for them. So that distribution is there. So it opens up so many doors. I mean, we're still in the infancy of it, right? YouTube's been around for 12 years. I think YouTube's been around for 12 years. Right? We're still in the infancy of all this. We haven't seen nothing yet, right? And so so that content delivery is there, which is what I was getting at. So, like, esports, right, is riding on the back of that content delivery. If we didn't have the internet in the form it's at right now with YouTube and Twitch, we wouldn't have content distribution for video games. We would have TV, right? And that's hard to get on. So the content distribution is there, and so the fact that we have a way to distribute the content, I mean, it's going to keep growing, right? So there's a way for people to get access to it. So kind of riding off the back of that, same way baseball did with radio, and football, basketball did with TV. We're riding on the back of YouTube and Twitch and whatever the other different places. And if this is 20 years in the future, then YouTube and Twitch are probably not even a thing, and it's probably going to be like some other freaking crazy platforms, right? But we're riding on the coattails of these video platforms, and so the content distribution is there. Is kind of what I was getting at. Long way around.
Okay, so that's kind of like where it is now, and why it's growing. What's your kind of prediction for where it'll be in 5 years and maybe 10 years?
So anybody that enjoys esports should be glad Corona came. Not that I'm glad that Corona, like,
took the lives or made people sick.
Yeah, like, it's bad, right? But, like, also Corona pushed us in a direction in what we were going, but it probably sped us up 10 years, maybe. Not about 10 years, maybe 5 or 6 years, right? Actually, probably closer to 10. I'm going to say 10 years. Coronavirus sped us up about 10 years.
It pushed up a cliff for 10 years.
Right,
it wasn't gradual. It was pushed off.
Yeah. We probably wouldn't get to where we're at right now, or where we'll be at next year for another, like, 8 or 9 or 10 years, just because, like, we're setting our ways, right? So a lot of times humans are setting their ways pretty well. So because of that, like, Corona caused a lot of people to work from home, right? So that was a big push in the right direction. Like, we've had the technology to work from home for 15 years now, 16 years, 18 years, 20 years. I don't know.
Very few jobs were doing it at the time, or before,
right.
8 months ago, 10 months ago.
Right. I mean, software people, like, we would work from home a lot. There was some edge fringe cases, but, like, pretty much everybody still went to the office, like your secretary, like accountants, like business salesmen, right? Like saleswomen, right? All these people went to the office. And but we've had the technology for, I mean, even if you say like 5, 8, 9 years, 10 years, right? Like, we've had the technology to work from home, but we haven't pushed there. And so similar thing with esports, right? Like, we've had content's been around for a while, right? It's been maturing. Like, we've had people have been starting to consider esports an actual real thing, right? Before Corona happened. But when Corona happened, it basically all sports stopped, and the only thing left was esports, right? And so
esports and content, like,
yeah. So
video game content,
right? So just the fact you couldn't go do anything, you can't go to concerts, you can't go to all this stuff. Like, but you were playing video games, right? So a lot of people that freaking Xboxes, PlayStations, right? All these consoles are sold out for a while, just because, like, what else are you going to do other than play video games and watch Netflix, right? And so that became a lot of people's hobbies, right? So a lot of people didn't have hobbies before. Their hobby was go hang out with friends, go like watch concerts, go, hang out at the river, go hang out at, go
At a bar or whatever.
yeah, go hit up a nightclub or something with your buddies and, on a Friday night or whatever. So that was kind of your hobby, right? So now your hobby became sports or became
Video
video
games,
games
esports.
because you couldn't do anything physical, right? We're trying to protect all the people that need protection, and so hey, you're at home, so what you can still get online with your buddies and play video games. So that was what everybody did, was get online with their buddies and play video games. And the more people play video games, the more people that are interested in watching video games. So it kind of comes back down full circle of like, you kind of have to know a little bit about what you're watching. Well, if more people are playing video games and more people are apt to watch video games, it's just something to watch and enjoy. So, to answer your question, like, we've sped up a lot. So I think the growth we've seen this year is probably going to slow down the next couple of years, just because like we won't have the big push, and we were already like way ahead. Like we pushed way ahead, and so now it's like we're going to slow down a little bit, kind of catch back up, and then they pick up again, and maybe it may keep skyrocketing. I don't know, but I feel like we're going to kind of slow down the next like 2 years and kind of like contract a little bit. Like, hey, we had a huge growth, and then we're going to kind of settle down and kind of grow slowly, and then maybe kick back up because something else happens. But and it's just going to grow. I mean, at 50 years, like we're going to laugh thinking that, oh, we were having the conversation of, is Call of Duty a real sport, right? Like that was, in 50 years, we're going to say that was a joke, right? So like, what the heck are you talking about? Is our video games a real sport? You play football? Like, what's football? Right? Like that's going to be us in 50 years, right? So
yeah, I think 10 years esports will, 5 years I say it passes the NFL. And then 10 to 15 years I say it passes sports in general. Because it's just so flexible. You're going to have the kids that are playing video games now, they're absorbing content now. They're going to continue to absorb content. And so in 15 years, what will be 40? There won't be much, there'll still be boomers, but like the boomer population will be so small comparative to the rest of the population that I feel like it'll be like, there'll be little league esports leagues. Like you're going to play with your 10 friends from school. You're going to be in your own league playing against other people in your county or whatever city. And so I think that'll be there. I mean, I say that might be 5 years, but as far as like the industry money wise, I think it'll be there probably 15 years. I don't know. Maybe that's too hot of a take or too quickly, but I agree with you that Corona did speed it up, and I'm not for sure if it's going to slow it down. If it's going to slow, I mean, it will slow down some, but the fact that other sports are hurting so much, like they're bleeding right now because they're not being watched. They're going to have to pay their players less this next year. Like their budgets are going down because the TV money is going down. That I think esports is going to take off. It's going to still continue to grow quite a bit. Maybe not as fast as this year, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I mean a little more nuanced than you were letting on originally. So like bigger than NFL, right? So we in America, we think the NFL's big. However, we're talking global esports, right? So like the NFL is a joke globally. So like, is it going to pass the NFL soon? Probably. But also, anyway, so I think it's a more nuanced answer, right? So like, as far as people involved, I think there'll be a significantly larger amount of people that are involved in esports than would ever even be hoped to be involved in NFL, or just that as a game, just in general, right? But it's a more nuanced question because there's so many more avenues in esports. It's a little more nuanced than just esports in general, right? Like maybe like some random game is approximately as big as NFL in 10 years, right? Maybe we get there. But also like the whole industry is, like going to be way bigger, right, than just that one game, because it's like you were saying earlier, it's a lot more nuanced of like what people enjoy watching. Like you have a lot more options. And you have a lot more options of, do I watch like professionals, or do I watch amateurs, or do I just watch like some random dude that I enjoy hanging out with on Twitch? So it's a little more nuanced than just esports to be bigger. Like, is it going to be bigger? Of course, it'll be bigger because it's worldwide. But if you take the same take on sports, right, you add soccer and NBA and whatever Australia plays and whatever Brazil, like all these other countries, like whatever they have for sports, right? You add all that up together, that's significant. I mean, that's freaking huge, right? So it's a little more nuanced of like, esports is going to be huge, but it's in general huge, not necessarily like one little piece of esports to be huge.
So you're saying I'm kind of comparing apples to oranges?
Not really apples to oranges. Maybe just a basket of apples versus one apple. Similar things, but not necessarily the same scope.
Okay. This says NFL was estimated earnings about $15 billion.
Right, which is a joke worldwide, right? Like,
yeah.
Look at soccer, that's a joke. So
look up World Cup, maybe.
Anyway, like I said, I think it's a more nuanced answer and question, because like, it will be bigger, yes. In general, yes, but like, you got to compare it to all sport. Like, if you want to compare like a basket of apples to a basket of apples, like all sports versus esports, right? So that's kind of your two distinctions at this point. So like, will sports still be around? Yes, but also we can kind of come back to it in a second. But I want to talk about the fact that sports are declining. We can talk about that a little bit. Did you find something you wanted to go into?
No, I was looking for World Cup stuff, but there's not any good stats.
Yeah. So, because it's not just one, it's a bunch of different countries and organizations. It's probably hard to grab their numbers. The NFL is one big nasty conglomerate, so it's easy to just say, oh yeah, here's a number.
You said something about the decline of sports.
Yeah, so like, sports has been on decline for a while now. It just didn't become apparent till this year, and it was probably apparent to some people, but like, the vast majority of people it wasn't apparent to until this year. So sports have been on decline, especially like smaller sports, like the WNBA, the NHL. Baseball's been on decline for the last freaking 50 years or something, right? So like, sports are on decline in general, and they were on decline before this year ever hit. But it just wasn't super apparent to majority of people before this year hit. Like, we were already reducing the amount of money we spent on TV. We're already reducing the amount of people that watched sports games. We're already reducing the amount of people that like enjoyed traveling and all that stuff. Like, people are already going away from doing physical in-person things, which is where a lot of the revenue comes from, and advertising. So like, these companies are starting to like actually pour real money into all these online platforms, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, Pandora, right? All these, Spotify, all these big platforms, content creators, right? Companies that actually matter as far as marketing dollars are concerned have been starting to pour significant money into other avenues than television. So television in general has been on decline for a while, and just sports has been on decline for a while. Just maybe
been way before that.
Yeah, so all this stuff's been on decline for a while. So I don't want people to like get too caught up in like, oh, Corona killed sports. It's like, no, Corona just sped up the fact sports were going away, and that we had tied insane, like the fact that sports, like NBA players make millions of dollars a year, is crazy, right? Like, we were in crazy land for a little while, so like, we're just backing away from crazy land. Oh no, instead of $2 million this year, you're gonna make $800,000 this year. Sorry, buddy. Like, way to ruin your life, right? Like, sorry, we were living in freaking crazy land for a little while. And so that's going to go away, right? So there may be a few people in esports that get paid significant millions of dollars a year, tens of millions of dollars a year. There may be some of that, but it's going to be a lot more people that get paid 50, 70, 80, $100,000 a year to play esports. And this is US dollars, right? So there's going to be a significantly bigger population playing. And so it's going to bring down your average salary. Like, you're still going to have some people that make it, but it's not going to be like the NBA where everybody in the NBA makes millions of dollars a year. It's going to be, it's going to be closer to soccer, probably, of like, I'm minor leagues and I make 40, 50, 60 grand, and I still have maybe I make 20 grand and I still have a part-time job or something, right? So like, you're going to see a lot more of that with esports just because it's so much more broad. So you're going to have content creators that make 20 grand a year from esports, and they keep a part-time job doing whatever else they do, right? Like, maybe they're a mechanic and they're part-time.
Creators are making a ton of money now. I'm sure they're making a lot more than we think. Whether that's like specific sponsorships or from donations, from subs.
Very, 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 very few people ever hit the millions of dollars a year range, right? You're in the maybe a couple $100,000 a year that you're bringing in. Very few people ever hit the millions. Like there's what you can probably count them on two hands. Probably don't have to take your shoes off to count, right? Like two hands of like individual content creators that make over 300,000 a year, right? Whereas the NFL, NBA, all these big baseball, even all these big sports, like there's a ton of people that make millions of dollars a year. So like you're at like just you're gonna have those few outliers, but overall you're gonna have very few people making significant money because there's so many more people competing for the money.
Well, I think you'd be surprised at how many are making quite a bit of money.
I mean, quite a bit of money is $200,000 a year. Like that's a huge amount of money.
I'm saying millions. I'm saying millions. I think you'd
You think
be
it's more than
surprised.
10
Yes.
individual? We're talking individual content creators.
Yes. I might be able to name 10 myself.
I don't know.
I'll be on the spot, but I don't think I don't think I can do it on the spot. But like,
Okay, but you get what I'm saying though. On average, like you're gonna have the outliers, right? But what does the NBA have? 600 players.
let's say you have 52, 55 players a team. There's 32 teams, so you do that math.
1,500 people.
I mean, then you have coaches and stuff, and they usually make over $1 million or so.
Maybe 2,000 people.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite a few, but the industry is going. The esports industry is going that content creators will for sure make more money than pro athletes will.
Today.
Today, it is that way. Not pro athletes, excuse me, esports athletes, not NFL players, but content creators are making more than your pro scene guys. I don't know if you're shocked or not, but
I don't know if I'm shocked. It's not in the same even close to realm. Okay, maybe there's 100. It's a significantly smaller number than your pro scene with any sport, right? Especially once you stack together all the sports involved. It's a rounding error, and you're going to see that. Right, you're going to have outliers, right? You're going to have a 0.01% of the population that always like are outliers, and they have a huge following, and they can actually pull in significant money. But it's going to be 0.01% of the population. Same way it is with friggin' sports, right? It's going to be 0.01. It's 0.01% of the population that plays professional sports, right? So like, it's a pretty small number compared to the whole population. And so yes, technically there probably are some outliers that make a significant amount of money, but you're going to have way, 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 way more people in the median range of like, we're making 100,000 a year, right? Because
I think it'll eventually get there for sure.
You talk about basketball, it's there, right? There's a significant number of content creators make less than $150,000 a year. Like most of your content creators make under $150,000 a year.
Yeah, but so it also depends on where you draw your line of, okay, I have 1,000 followers on Twitch. Am I a content creator now? Like, do you consider if you have 100 followers, are you a content creator?
No, if you are full-time content creation, then you're a content creator. Like, yeah, people have a side hobby, but you're always gonna have side hobby stuff, right? Like the people that make 50,000, 60,000 don't have to have a real job, right? That's content creators, right? So the people that don't have a real job that just make content compared to the people that make more than sports people, like that's a huge number comparatively. And you think about people that are semi-pro athletes compared to the pro athletes, right? Like your numbers are way, way different. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So like maybe you have, I'm just throwing numbers out there, 300,000 content creators that their full-time job is doing content, and you have 1,000 that make significant money, and we're talking in the range of professional sport player money. Well, that number is flipped in far as like, I mean, not say flipped, it's essentially different, right? So you have, let's say 2,000 people in the NBA. How many people that are in the semi-pros that make money?
Oh, well, that was NFL. 2000 was NFL, but
okay, whatever, NFL. Right? Name one sport, and like comparatively to like your semi-pro people that are just kind of playing for fun, more or less, like maybe get a shot that make enough money They make enough money to not do anything else, but they're not in the pro leagues.
Yeah, I'd say semi-pro is probably anywhere from like $20,000 to probably 80,000, I would think.
Sure. So like, how many people do that? Right? Is there 5,000, 10,000?
It's probably about this comparable to what's actually in the NFL.
So you have 2,000, 2,000. That's a significantly different number than 300,000 and 1,000 or 2,000, right? Yeah. So I think that number is kind of where I was getting at of like you're gonna have a lot more people in the mid range that do it for full time, but they don't make huge money, right? So that was kind of the point I was driving. It was like it's so much broader. You're gonna have a huge portion of people that do content creation or play video games, whatever you want to talk about. They do something along the lines of content creation / video games, and that's their full-time gig, and they can afford for that to be their full-time gig. You're gonna have huge, like say, I mean, we think 300,000 to 1,000. I mean, your NBA is 50 or NFL like 50-50, right? Like significantly different numbers.
Yeah, but I mean, to make $100,000 on Twitch is without donations is 2,400 subs on Twitch.
Sure.
So I'm trying to, I mean, there's quite a few content creators out there right now that make that, which drives to what you were saying. But I think you would be surprised how many make big money just from subs, donations, and then sponsorships. But anyways, I think players will be using their platform as a pro player to launch themselves into content creation post retirement.
Oh, that's a smart thing to do, right? Like every celebrity should be doing that, right? Like it's the same game celebrities played. It's all the same game. It's just
grow your other platform.
Exactly, it's all the same game. It's just the how you play the game's different. So it's the same game of like, oh, you're a professional athlete. Okay, your next step should be going and freaking being in movies, right? Like you go be a professional athlete for 8-10 years and you make a name for yourself. All right, transition that over to movies, and now you'll make movies for the next 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, right? Like that. It's the same gig. It's just different way. It's different rules, different ways to play the game.
I feel like a lot of that is you use either somebody else's platform or you grow your own platform. And then you take that platform and use it to drive some other type of monetization by growing that using your first platform, and it just stepping stones of like slowly growing multiple platforms up to a large following to make, good money.
It's all about skill of like, it's a skill, right? To grow an audience, to keep people interested, and to transition it over to something else. So it's just a skill. And so we have some people that are really good at it, some people that are really bad at it. There's friggin' plenty of professional players that were professional players and you never heard about ever again after they quit their professional career. They're bad at it. You have plenty of people that have some professional sports career and they go off into making music or TV or radio or
a baseball guy, Trevor May. He's a pitcher he was for the Twins, but he does content creation now. Or I say now alongside his platform is
oh yeah, now there's like you're saying you're playing the same game now. I was talking 20-30 years ago. Like it's just different rules, right? Same rules they were playing 30, 40, 50 years ago in pro scene. Just today the rules have changed, but it's same game. Or maybe same game, different rules, same skill of like, hey, I was good at this and I have a following that I built up and put the work in to build it up, and now I'm gonna transition over to whatever, underwater basket weaving, right? Like whatever it is.
Did you have any other comments or things that you wanted to re-talk about or hot takes or?
I'll probably be here for the next 6 hours talking about this. So
we can continue next week when Johnny comes back on. If
take
people want
to next week.
Yeah, take two. And maybe Grady will be on next week as well. So we can have us four talk about it, what their thoughts are. And then we can move on to something else. Maybe talk about it for 15, 20 minutes and then move on. But if you don't have anything else, I guess I'll sign us out. Anyways, it's been Click Gaming. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next week. Today we're recording 29th. It'll be live tomorrow. But we'll see you next week. Make sure to check out the links below for social media. Sign up for tournaments on battlefly.com/clickgaming. Got a bunch of fun events. Check us out on Twitch, and we'll see you later. See you.